Julian the Apostate. Flavius Claudius Julianus was a Roman emperor, 361 to 363, of the Constantinian dynasty. He was the last pagan Roman emperor, and tried to promote the Roman religious traditions of earlier centuries as a means of slowing the spread of Christianity. His philosophical studies earned him the attributes the philosopher during the period of his life and of those of his successors. Christian sources commonly refer to him as Julian the Apostate, because of his rejection of Christianity and attempt to rid the empire of Christianity while bringing back ancient Roman religion. He had the makings of a competent, intelligent emperor. He was better educated and more cultured than any emperor had been for more than a century. However, in choosing to resurrect the old religion against the new faith, he backed the wrong side because Christianity's momentum was too strong to be halted. He did not lack virtue, suggested by his early edicts on religious tolerance and his personal lack of ostentation. His premature death from a battlefield wound may have resulted from a belief in his own invincibility, perhaps in his destiny to restore Rome's days of pagan glory based on the Sibylline oracle that appeared to promise victory against the Persians. The early years. Julian, born in 331 in Constantinople, was the son of Julius Constantius, half-brother of Emperor Constantine I, and his second wife, Basilina. In the turmoil after the death of Constantine in 337, in order to establish himself as sole emperor, Julian's zealous Arian Christian cousin Constantius II led a massacre of Julian's family. Constantius ordered the murders of many descendants from the second marriage of Constantius Chlorus and Theodora. Constantius II then saw to a strict Arian Christian education of the surviving Julian and his brother Gallus. In traditional accounts of his life, considerable weight is given to Julian's early psychological development and education. Initially growing up in Bithynia, raised by his maternal grandmother, at the age of 7 he was tutored by Eusebius, the Arian Christian bishop of Nicomedia. However, in 342, he was exiled to the imperial estate in Cappadocia. At the age of 18, the exile was lifted and he dwelt briefly in Constantinople and Nicomedia. In 351, Julian returned to Asia Minor to study Neoplatonism. Rise to power. Julian became Caesar over the western provinces by order of Constantius II in 355, and in this role he campaigned successfully against the Alemannian Franks. Most notable was his crushing victory over the Alemanni at the Battle of Argentoratum, Strasbourg, in 357, leading his 13,000 men against a Germanic army 3 times larger. In 360, Julian was proclaimed Augustus by his soldiers at Lutetia, Paris, sparking a civil war with Constantius. However, Constantius died before the two could face each other in battle, and named Julian as his successor. Among his first actions, Julian reduced the expenses of the imperial court, removing all the eunuchs from the offices. He reduced the luxury of the court established with Constantius, reducing at the same time the number of servants and the guards. Julian's religious beliefs and antipathy toward Christianity. Julian is called by Christians the apostate because he converted from Christianity to Theology. As attested in private letters between him and the rhetorician Libanius, Julian had Christianity forced on him as a child by his cousin Constantius II, who was a zealous Arian Christian and would have not tolerated a pagan relative. Reacting violently against the Christian teaching that he had received in a lonely and miserable childhood, he had developed a passionate interest in the art, literature and mythology of Greece and had grown to detest the new religion which condemned all he loved as pernicious vanity. He was of a strongly religious temperament, and found solace in the pantheistic mysticism which contemporary Neoplatonist philosophers taught. After his conversion to Hellenism, he devoted his life to protecting and restoring the fame and security of this tradition. Julian started a religious reformation of the state, which was intended to restore the lost strength of the Roman state. He also forced the Christian Church to return the riches looted from the pagan temples after the Christian religion was made legitimate by Constantine. He supported the restoration of the old Roman faith, based on polytheism. His laws tended to target wealthy and educated Christians, and his aim was not to destroy Christianity but to drive the religion out of the governing classes of the empire. Julian reduced the influence of Christian bishops in public offices. The lands taken by the church were to be returned to their original owners, and the bishops lost the privilege to travel for free, at expenses of the state. Edict on Religious Liberty. In 362, Julian promulgated an edict to guarantee freedom of religion. This edict proclaimed that all the religions were equal in front of the law, and that the Roman Empire had to return to its original religious eclecticism, according to which the Roman state did not impose any religion on its provinces. Constantine and his immediate successors had forbidden the upkeep of pagan temples, and many temples were destroyed and pagan worshippers of the old religions killed during the reign of Constantine and his successors. The extent to which the emperors approved or commanded these destructions and killings is disputed, but it is certain they did not prevent them. Julian's religious status is a matter of considerable dispute. According to one theory, Julian's paganism was highly eccentric and atypical because it was heavily influenced by an esoteric approach to Platonic philosophy, sometimes identified as Neoplatonism. Others have argued that Julian's philosophical perspective was nothing unusual for a cultured pagan of his time, and, at any rate, that Julian's paganism was not limited to philosophy alone, and that he was deeply devoted to the same gods and goddesses as other pagans of his day. Anti-Christian edicts. Since the persecution of Christians by past Roman emperors had seemingly only strengthened Christianity, many of Julian's actions were designed to harass and undermine the ability of Christians to organize in resistance to the re-establishment of pagan acceptance in the empire. Julian's preference for a non-Christian and non-philosophical view of effect of a supernatural or divine agency in human affairs seems to have convinced him that it was right to outlaw the practice of the Christian view and demanded the suppression of the Christian set of mysteries. The Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches retell a story concerning two of his bodyguards who were Christians. When Julian came to Antioch, he prohibited the veneration of the relics. The two bodyguards opposed the edict, and were executed at Julian's command. The Orthodox Church remembers them as saints. In his edict, Julian forbids Christian teachers from using the pagan scripts that formed the core of Roman education. If they want to learn literature, they have Luke and Mark, let them go back to their churches and expound on them, the edict says. This was an attempt to remove some of the power of Christian schools which at that time and later have used at large ancient Greek literature in their teachings in an effort to present Christian religion superior to the previous. The edict was also a severe financial blow, as it deprived Christian scholars, tutors and teachers of many students. In his Tolerance Edict of 362, Julian decreed the reopening of pagan temples, the restitution of alienated temple properties, and called back Christian bishops that were exiled by church edicts. The latter was an instance of tolerance of different religious views, but may also have been seen as an attempt by Julian to widen a schism between different Christian sects, further weakening the Christian movement as a whole. because Christian charities were beneficial to all, including pagans. It put this aspect of the Roman citizen's life out of the control of the imperial authority and under that of the Church. Thus Julian envisioned the institution of a Roman philanthropic system and cared for the behavior and the morality of the pagan priests, in the hope that it would mitigate the reliance of pagans on Christian charity. These impious Galileans not only feed their own poor, but ours also, welcoming them into their agape they attract them, as children are attracted, with cakes, whilst the pagan priests neglect the poor. The hated Galileans devote themselves to works of charity, and by a display of false compassion have established and given effect to their pernicious errors. See their love feasts, and their tables spread for the indigent. Such practice is common among them, and causes contempt for our gods. His care in the institution of a pagan hierarchy in opposition to the Christian one was due to his wish to create a society in which every aspect of the life of the citizens was to be connected, through layers of intermediate levels, to the consolidated figure of the emperor, the final provider for all the needs of his people. Within this project, there was no place for a parallel institution, such as the Christian hierarchy or the Christian charity. After his arrival in Antiochia in preparation for the Persian War, the temple of Apollo burned down. Since Julian believed Christians to be responsible, their main church was closed. He denounced Christianity as of appeal only to rustics. It was nothing more than fables and irrational dogmas. It was nothing but trickery. Julian's attempt to rebuild the Jewish temple. In 363, Julian, on his way to engage Persia, stopped at the ruins of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. In keeping with his effort to foster religions other than Christianity, Julian ordered the temple rebuilt. The failure to rebuild the temple has been ascribed to an earthquake, common in the region, and to the Jews' ambivalence about the project. Sabotage is a possibility, as is an accidental fire. Divine intervention was the common view among Christian historians of the time. Death. In March 363, Julian started his campaign against the Sassanid Empire, with the goal of taking back the Roman cities conquered by the Sassanids under the rule of Constantius II, which his cousin had failed to take back. Receiving encouragement from an oracle in the old Sibylline books posted from Rome, and moving forward from Antioch with about 90,000 men, Julian entered Sassanid territory. An army of 30,000 was sent, under the command of Procopius, to Armenia, from where, having received reinforcements from the king of Armenia, it was to attack the Sassanid capital from the north. Julian victoriously led the Roman army into enemy territory, conquering several cities and defeating the Sassanid troops. He arrived under the walls of the Sassanid capital, Ctesiphon, but even after defeating a superior Sassanid army in front of the city, he could not take the Persian capital. Also Procopius did not return with his troops, so Julian decided to lead his army back to the safety of the Roman borders. During this retreat, in June 363, Julian died near Maranga, aged 31, during a battle against the Sassanid army. While pursuing the retreating enemy with few men, and not wearing armor, he received a wound from a spear that reportedly pierced his liver. The wound was not immediately deadly. Julian was treated by his personal physician, who seems to have made every attempt to treat the wound. Historians stated that Julian might have been assassinated by a Christian who was one of his own soldiers. Many cities have set him beside the images of the gods and honor him as they do with the gods. Already a blessing has been besought of him in prayer, and it was not in vain. To such an extent has he literally ascended to the gods. However, no similar action was taken by the Roman central government, which would be more and more dominated by Christians in the ensuing decades. The report that his dying words were "You have won," Galileans supposedly expressing his recognition that, with his death, Christianity would become the empire's state religion.